Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Thursday morning to you all. Hope everyone is doing awesome out there this morning and having a great start to your day and a fantastic week out there so far. Here to bring you a lot of information about what's to come. Of course, first off, let's talk about what's going to happen weather-wise for your Thursday. We'll speak on that, give you all the details, talk about a severe weather risk for today, kind of the beginning stages of a winter storm that's going to stretch across the northern sections of the country. We'll give you all the details. Definitely take advantage of those timestamps. They're there to help you folks out. We'll have everything sectioned out very well. So, of course, we'll speak on the weather today into tomorrow. And that will include an update on another winter storm that's going to move into the northeast as we are getting into tomorrow, into our Saturday, which we'll have that sectioned off for you guys to just, specifically tune to that if you live in the interior New England area, which I do think has a pretty good shot to see a pretty significant winter storm into this weekend. And then after all that, we'll switch gears and we'll talk about what's to come as we are getting deeper into our weekend, into early next week, where a pretty substantial storm system could affect the western and central U.S. especially. So we'll talk about what kind of impacts that's going to bring. I think we're going to have a big time late season winter storm, a couple days of severe weather out of it, and there's just a lot to figure out for sure as far as the axis of heaviest snow and those areas that will have the highest chance of severe weather. And kind of in between all that, I forgot to mention, we will speak on the latest information on this low pressure that will plague the southeastern portion of the country's weekend weather. So we'll talk about how much rain could fall from that. So a lot to speak on. And of course, after we can get some of this stuff behind us, some of these videos will get a little bit shorter, but there's just a lot to speak on coming up as things are getting much more active. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below so I can pray over it and so others can do so too. Let's get rocking and rolling. Here we go. So we got some snow flying around. Some of this is not hitting the ground. Some of it is. I kind of looked at real-time observations and nobody's really reporting anything as of right now. But based off radar, definitely looks like some of this is hitting the ground. But this isn't really the main energy right here. The main energy is really going to get juiced up here in Montana and to the Dakotas as we are starting to get into later morning hours into this afternoon and evening. So this will be a heavy topic in this video, as a stripe of accumulating snow will stretch across the northern plains all the way into the interior northeast. We spoke on this system in last night's video. This continues to wrap up, but we will continue to deal with some heavy snow for about the next 12 hours, especially in northern Maine. Snowing pretty good in northern areas of New Brunswick and just eastern Canada. And then we got the widespread rains across Oklahoma and especially Texas this morning, even some thunderstorms in southeastern Texas, and there will be a severe weather threat down here today. Some moisture across the northern Rockies, Pacific Northwest, but definitely not a lot compared to what you guys are used to. And then we still got some lake effect snow bands still popping off the Great Lakes. So Storm Prediction Center today. Really the area to watch for is this marginal and slight risk in the yellow. That's a level 2 out of 5 risk. This does include Houston and surrounding areas. This has kind of shrunk somewhat, but we could get some severe weather today. Kind of two different modes that we'll watch out for, and we'll speak a little bit more specifically on what I mean with that once we get to the south central frame. But with that slight risk, what's that driven off of? Well, there is a 2% risk of a tornado, and this is really hugged up against the actual Gulf Coast of Louisiana and Texas, but it does include Houston. 2% risk of a tornado within 25 miles of any given location today, 5% risk of winds. And then the hail threat, I think, is the biggest threat, but we could have some increases with this later today with some updates that will come in throughout the day. But in the yellow, you do have a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger, so we will watch out for an elevated risk of hail. Excessive rainfall outlook, we could get a good bit of rain in eastern Texas today. It's raining pretty good out there in certain sections of Oklahoma and Texas already this morning. But as of now, just a marginal risk, at least a 5% risk of flash flood guidance occurring. And then watches, warnings, advisories. So this can get a little bit complex here. These winter weather advisories that you see here, which are still up for some of these areas shaded in blue. But these winter weather advisories in purple is for what's to come over the next 24 to 36 hours. Okay? This winter storm warning in the pink is what's going on right now. Now you see these winter storm watches in northern Montana. You might have some up in South Dakota, not quite sure. Some of these watches, warnings, and advisories are overlapping one another. And then you see these winter storm watches up here for the interior Northeast. That's for what's to come later on down the road. Now these winter storm watches are, I got a little confusing there. Let me back up a punt here. Winter storm watches are for this event right here, the winter weather advisories. And what I mean is these winter storm watches here are for what's to come later this weekend. And definitely a totally different system for what's driving this. This and this are connected. This is what's trailing off right now. This is for what's to come this weekend. So it's actually 3 different events. One is what's going on right now. Then you got the winter storm watches up for the northern sections of the Sierra Nevada. All right, a little bit confusing. I made it a little bit more confusing than what it had to be. But anyways, I hope you got it. Southeast today, pretty quiet weather. Another nice day. Yesterday was beautiful. But, we'll start to see the increase in moisture in areas of southwestern Louisiana. Some rain will begin to move in. More of a steady rain in the southern sections of Louisiana. I think that with this low forming, it's going to really just kind of hang out more in the Gulf of Mexico instead of over land. So you're just going to lack ingredients for severe weather. But you could have some for sure, especially as we get into the overnight hours. Could have a couple thunderstorms down here in the southern tip of Florida. Very possible as moisture gets on the increase. But I think most of the energy, as we're getting into the middle of the night tonight, hangs out in the Gulf of Mexico. If this was land out here, then we could have a real threat of severe weather. But obviously it's not. And then all this energy tries to make it all the way into Florida as we're waking up tomorrow morning. Could have some thunderstorms even in southern Georgia. A little bit of shower activity, storm activity. And southeastern Louisiana, some showers greeting you guys, and central Mississippi. But man, there's some storms raging deep down here in the Gulf of Mexico. Thank goodness this isn't over land, or this might be a legit severe weather event. Might have multiple water spouts just out here in the Gulf of Mexico. But this is what could happen between today and the next 24 hours. Okay, not super active in the immediate southeast region. The northeast Maine's kind of wrapping up this winter storm, but you'll continue to deal with heavy snow in the northern half of Maine and eastern Maine throughout the morning hours into this afternoon. And then this will finally taper off later this evening. Could have some lingering lake effect snows off Ontario and Erie. Not a big deal, though, today at all. And then we start to get into tomorrow morning. Then you start to see some snow creeping into the picture. And we'll give you an update on this here in a second. But we're just going to speak on the next 24 hours in the northeast. But between now and the rest of this event, another several inches of snow is possible, especially the further you get up in northern Maine, up near the Canadian line. Another half a foot of snow is possible. Caribou, another few inches of snow. South central U.S., let's talk about this severe weather threat. HRRR model not doing the best job at initiation convection, but certainly as we start to move into this afternoon, 2 things are going on. You still got some storms that could be a little bit closer to the coastline, what is shown for Louisiana and Texas. But we start to get these storms that start to form up here in northern Texas, southern Oklahoma. I wouldn't be surprised we get a slight risk extended up into this region for some hailstorms. Cold air intrusion will allow for lapse rates supportive for hail with these systems. This will kind of develop into almost like a little vortex, little spin, and then sweep into Louisiana. We got to watch for the tornado threat with this. But a little bit closer look at how this could evolve today. Look at all those storms that could get juiced up later this morning along the Gulf coastline in Texas. A little bit of storm activity a little bit closer out to San Antonio, Austin. And a lot of heavy rain could fall in eastern Texas from this. But then we start to get these thunderstorms that begin to develop here in southern Oklahoma and central Texas. And I'm telling you, these storms could produce some gusty winds, some hail. It could drop a lot of hail potentially. And then this has a little bit of a spin to it. We're starting to get to about midnight, 1 a.m. And definitely a little spin. You got to watch out with these spins. If the entire complex of storms is spinning, then, something is spinning aloft too, which means you could have a weak tornado risk in this little spin. But this eventually spins on out into Louisiana and southern Arkansas and ain't a big deal anymore. But the updraft Felicity swath does indicate a little bit of rotation with some of this in this area of Texas. A little bit up here too, but I wouldn't rule it out up here in this area of Texas too, kind of south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But most of the higher signals of a spin of these storms is really out in the Gulf of Mexico. But I really want to watch the immediate coastline, maybe an hour inland, even from Corpus Christi all the way to Houston, all the way into the Lake Charles region of Louisiana. So, just watch this area right in here today for sure. North central U.S. So this is what we'll spend a little bit of time dealing with. Still a little bit of lake effect energy off Lake Superior throughout the morning and the afternoon hours. We could have a separation of a little bit of energy. Could snow a little bit in Minneapolis later on, all the way in the southern sections of Wisconsin. But really the meat of the system moves in kind of later tonight. Like this is, this evening, later this afternoon, you see the snow overspreading most of North Dakota. A little bit heavier, but not as widespread in northern South Dakota, especially northeastern South Dakota. And then we have a kind of a connection here, kind of a long system. But Minneapolis getting hit, around 10 p.m. tonight with some moderate to heavy snow, snowing pretty good in central Minnesota, still snowing back in the Dakotas. And then we take it all the way to about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. We got this kind of banding of snow getting all the way into western and southwestern sections of lower Michigan, still snowing back here in extreme eastern areas of the Dakotas, snowing in, pretty much 75% of Minnesota. Snowing for almost the entire state of Wisconsin at this point. And, we take it all the way to about daybreak, about 7, 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. It could be snowing pretty good right near this low pressure. There's warm air aloft, saturated column, meaning the atmosphere is basically super saturated, which means it's squeezing out every bit of moisture possible. And if it's just cold enough for snow, that means all of it's going to be snow. We could have those fat, wet snowflakes here. So watch out if you live northern, northeastern Iowa. Could catch you a little bit by surprise. But you remember how we've been talking about over the last couple of videos? I thought the snowfall totals would increase for southern Wisconsin. Well, they have. And guys, when I do that, I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just to kind of go back, observation, kind of compare what we're seeing and see how we can match that up for the future off models. It's really just about trusting the models. And they kind of were showing this, and the HRRR model was, and sure enough, they've increased. The National Weather Service has increased snowfall totals for southern Wisconsin. We'll talk about that here in a second. But this continues. You kind of have this like intense banding of snow later in the Friday morning, and we are getting more into our Friday, midday Friday, still snowing in central lower Michigan. And then we start to get a period of accumulating snow into southern Ontario. And then this heads on off, and you can already see the beginning stages of some more snow making its way into eastern South Dakota and Nebraska. Kind of a broad look at how much snow is expected from this. Guys, this isn't one of those blockbuster events by any means, okay? Especially for the Dakotas and Minnesota standards, even for the later portion of March. I mean, you guys see this almost every year, but it's really just a pattern we're in because we're going to have a more substantial winter storm around the corner, literally. So just a very scrawny kind of swath of accumulating snow, 3 to as much as 6 inches of snow, especially once you get into southeastern North Dakota, northeastern South Dakota. And then it kind of broadens up a little bit in Minnesota. I know 3 to 4 inches of snow ain't a lot for Minneapolis, but could be more. And then we kind of move into the upper Midwest. Look how it's increased for southern Wisconsin. This little axis of 6 to 8 inches of snow was a little bit further north. It's actually shrunk a little bit, but still there in lower Michigan. All right, but let's just jump to these graphics really everybody wants to see. Okay, shows you towns, cities, and everything. All right, this is out of North Dakota. Bismarck, 2 to 3 inches of snow. Ashley, 3 to 5. Linton, 2 to 4. Minot, 1 to 3. It shows other cities too. Definitely pause it if you need to. Head on to the Fargo region. 2 to 3 inches of snow in Fargo. Foreman, 4 to 6. Valley City, 2 to 4. Sharp cutoff, though. Northern areas of Minnesota probably won't get much snow from this, if any at all. And then we head a little bit south for our friends here in South Dakota. Siston, maybe is how you pronounce it. 4 to 6 inches of snow. Ortonville, 2 to 4. Brighton, 3 to 4. Wheaton, 3 to 4 inches of snow. But Aberdeen, 1 to 3. But there's a sharp cutoff. You get down to Sioux Falls, not expecting really anything from this. And then we start to get into Minnesota. Alexandria, 2 to 4. Hutchinson, 2 to 4. Twin Cities, 2 to 5. St. Cloud, 3 to 4. So Eau Claire, 2 to 5. So, starting to increase a little bit in here. And, the Twin Cities region, Minneapolis, could be the epicenter of maybe the heaviest snow in Minnesota. But then we start to sneak into Wisconsin and then areas of Iowa. I could see somewhere in Iowa getting more than what they're forecasting, but just widespread anywhere from 2 to 6 inch snowfall totals in this area. Was that Dacura, 3 to 5 inches of snow. And we start to get into Madison, guys. 4 to 8 inches of snow now projected here. La Crosse, 2 to 6. Eau Claire, 2 to 5. Woosall, I think is how you pronounce it, 3 to 6. So And then we get into the Duluth area. I didn't show this over the last couple of videos. Some snow, but the further north you get, the less. The further south you get, more. And then we start to get down to the Green Bay area. Green Bay, the snowfall totals have actually decreased. 3 to 4 inches of snow now, but you get down to Appleton, 4 to 6. Oshkosh, 4 to 6. Lola, 4 to 6 inches of snow. Florence up here, 2 to 3 inches of snow. And then we get into southern Wisconsin. This is when, where we could potentially see an upgrade to a winter storm warning. Just winter weather advisories now. Milwaukee, 4 to 8 inches of snow now projected. Janesville, I think last night was showing 1 to 3, maybe 2 to 4. Now 3 to 7 inches of snow. Could get half a foot of snow. So this area has increased. Madison, 3 to 7. All right, and even some areas like Rockford, calling for 2 to 3 inches of snow now. Still saying an inch or less in Chicago, but we'll see what you can get out of this. Northern Lower Michigan, including areas of the UP. Traverse City, 2 to 4. Cadillac, 3 to 6. Grayling, Gaylord, about 2 to 5, 2 to 4 inches of snow. But then we get down into the rest of Lower Michigan. Alma, 4 to 8. Grand Rapids, 4 to 6. Lansing, 2 to 4. So, Clare, 4 to 8. So a pretty decent winter weather event for Lower Michigan. So we'll talk about the Northeast with the rest of this system here in a second. But the Western U.S., really the only area to talk about is this event that's about to move into the Dakotas and Minnesota that we just spoke on. And it starts in Montana, where we'll get a period of light and moderate snow throughout northern Montana, northeastern Montana today. And we'll continue to get a feed of moisture all the way down into the Rockies of Montana. Even after that, this energy right here kind of detaches from this. We'll continue to just get some moisture that gets kind of reamplified across the Rockies of central and western Montana. And then we start to see the beginning stages of a powerful storm system. It's kind of multiple rounds of energy. And then we're waking up tomorrow morning with some rain across the northern California coastline, Oregon coastline. And then we start to see an active period of weather that begins for the western U.S. But up here in Montana, between now and the next 24 hours, several inches of snow in the higher elevations of Montana. A little bit of snow in Yellowstone National Park, Bighorn Mountains, not a lot. But northern Montana, even outside these higher mountain ranges, a good 2 to 4 inches of snow is expected from this. Temperatures today, very cold up in the Northeast, sub-freezing temperatures when you work yourself into interior Northeast. Just some cold times, only in the 30s in Boston most likely. New York City probably the same, maybe low 40s. And then you go from Washington, D.C., which is kind of like a chilly, wintry like day. You get down to the Carolinas, 60s and 70s. Deep South, 70s. Some 80-degree temperatures are possible across the Deep South, even outside of Florida. Chilly conditions across the Midwest, Ohio Valley. But there's a pretty stout temperature gradient in Missouri. We're in northern Missouri, just 50s. Southern Missouri, 70s and 60s. So very cold up here in the north-central U.S. And then you get into the western U.S. and certainly above average temperatures for now. I think this will change. You're starting to get into Montana, though, especially northern Montana up here near the Canadian line, sub-freezing temperatures. But, man, all that snow you got in Colorado is definitely melting if it hasn't already. And which some areas got like 3 to 4 feet. I doubt it's melted already. But, I mean, look at down here in the desert Southwest. I mean, 70s, 80s, a nice day in Las Vegas, San Diego, LA. Nice day in the valley. So let's kind of reattach what we just spoke on for that snow for areas of the country. So it's the same system. So, quiet Friday. Kind of Friday's the day you're in between both systems. The one that's you're dealing with right now in Maine and the one that's to come. But guys, this one coming in, it's going to take a while to kind of fully move in. I think you'll have some widespread light snow tomorrow evening across New York State. A little bit of cold air entrenched in place. So before this low really moves in and starts to bring warm air aloft, you definitely could start out some very heavy snow in Syracuse, Watertown, Buffalo, all the way maybe into the Albany region, all the way into, certainly Vermont. Look at a little bit of ice in the Catskills, Berkshires, maybe even the Poconos. Look at this icing showing up in Erie. And this continues. And guys, this is getting into Saturday morning, waking up to an all-out winter storm in the Adirondacks. I mean, it's cold enough in the Tug Hill Plateau. It really shows it's cold enough the entire duration of the system for Buffalo. it doesn't really get juiced up until it moves further east in the interior northeast. But, you take it all the way into about mid to late morning, Saturday morning. This is some very heavy snow. And with a low pressure kind of nosing in, this is going to bring what we call maybe like frontogenesis. And we kind of talked about it just a second ago in Iowa. And this could definitely bring a setup where you're getting like 1, 2, 3 inch per hour rates, because as this low pressure moves in, brings a lot of warm air aloft, warm air to the surface, but in areas it's still cold enough for snow. Snowing like crazy at like 31, 32 degrees, 30 degrees. Saturated column, snowing those fat, wet snowflakes you typically do see late in the winter season into spring. But you got to watch out for these pockets of pink and orange you're seeing. That's sleet and freezing rain. And I do think there'll be a corridor favored for some nasty freezing rain. Am I thinking like a catastrophic ice storm? I know, but I do think some appreciable ice totals are possible. And as this low continues to move up, this is a wind-driven rain for the I-95 corridor from, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philly, New York City, all the way to Boston. No winter weather for you guys. But as this low begins to kind of move off this way, you stay all snow in the Adirondacks. Northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire. Another big winter storm. This one will be much more substantial for Maine. And then you get even too, warm for any kind of winter weather for like southern Vermont, southern New Hampshire. But this continues, and as cold air kind of oozes behind this, we're getting into late Saturday evening. Could switch to some snow all the way as far south as the Berkshires. But look at this pink. Nasty corridor freezing rain kind of stretching through New Hampshire, through Maine. Stays all snow for certain areas, though. And by the time we're getting to Sunday morning, this is starting to head on off. And with the placement of this low pressure, I think most of Atlantic Canada is not going to get winter weather from this, but I'll have to dive into that a little bit more. But folks, we don't have any updated close-in graphics of this, but this is snowfall as of right now, just through Saturday evening. So the system's not completely done for Maine, but already calling for widespread 6 to 12 inch snowfall totals, especially in those a few thousand feet up. But this could increase, guys. I really think you're going to start to see some totals increase to probably over a foot of snow. And then there is an ice signal. The National Weather Service not really speaking on this ice signal as much, but there is a ice signal, a few 1/100ths of an inch of ice. Someone's definitely going to get a 1/10 of an inch of ice. And so we're going to have to deal with some freezing rain with this. Which is, you don't want to deal with that. The southeast, kind of the same system we just talked about with the northeast. This is starting off tomorrow morning. Probably going to be dealing with some thunderstorms for areas of Florida, the panhandle of Florida. But really, it's just a lot of rain. We're getting into midday Friday. It's a nasty day. This low pressure begins to cut across the southeast, just bringing a lot of rain across Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas. Some gusty conditions with the low pressure just riding kind of above us here. Kind of almost a secondary low down here in Florida. Man, just a washout to kickstart your weekend. Nasty weekend. It's going to just plague any kind of weekend outdoor activities you got. Just kind of a good weekend to sit inside and watch some March Madness for sure. My team, South Carolina, guys, wish me luck. Plays Oregon today. If I got any Oregon fans, no hard feelings, but we play Oregon, I think, at 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's a big game. My South Carolina Gamecock basketball team typically does not get into the tournament. The last time they went to the Final Four of those, so we'll see what happens. Anyways, back to weather, not sports. But, man, look, Saturday morning, waking up to an absolute just washout in the Delmarva region, and then you finally head on out. And, I mean, it takes clear all the way into Sunday before we're done with this. And I do think we'll have a nicer day Sunday. But rainfall between now and basically Saturday evening. Could get several inches of rain. It's the southern tip of Florida. But, I would say from eastern Alabama through the Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, the Delmarva region, anywhere from 1 to as much as 3 inches of rain. You're going to get some pockets of heavier rain, some thunderstorms, but it's going to be it's going to wash the pollen away, but it just keeps happening on the same days, which is Friday and Saturday. So, all right, let's move on to next week. Well, this is this weekend, actually. This is actually Saturday morning. We just spoke on this, but look, if you look on this side of your screen, you got another system already moving in. This is bringing a lot of higher elevation snow in the Rockies, Sierra Nevada, the Cascades, okay? Nothing unusual there. There's not a lot of cold air with this system, at all. We're just kind of getting later in March. So we don't have a lot of cold air to deal with. All right. Now, there's some cold air trapped in Montana, kind of east and north of the Alps. I said that last night too. North and east of the Rockies. The Appalachian Mountains is not in the western U.S., Mitch, but you kind of get multiple areas of energy. One right here, one right here. So we're getting kind of a increase in snow in the Rockies of the central and southern Rockies also. Just a lot of precipitation. And then this begins to move in the central U.S., which we'll kind of zoom into. All right, and back this up a little bit. All right, this is getting into Saturday evening, already getting some more light snow, kind of making its way through the north central U.S., the Midwest. Look at this little pocket of light snow. And then we're starting to get into Sunday morning. Look at all the snow flying around areas of Idaho, Montana. It's kind of a complex setup. You got this initial low right in here that's starting to bring a snowstorm into Minnesota, even northern areas of Iowa. Definitely cold enough for snow up here in the Dakotas. Maybe western Nebraska, this darker blues, moderate to heavy snow. Look at this heavy snow, though, moving up here. And I do think you're going to get this favored period in like somewhere in Wisconsin, southern Minnesota as we're getting into the middle of the night, Sunday night and a Monday, of very heavy snow. And then this system looks like it kind of weakens, and you got kind of the strengthening of another system that then begins to weaken as we get deeper into Monday. But, in the meantime, it's dropping heavy snow, maybe all the way as far south as the western panhandle of Oklahoma. But look at this snow again in Colorado after you've already dealt with a winter storm several days ago. Snowing in western Kansas, snowing in the central and western Nebraska, still snowing all the way up here in the southern Minnesota, Wisconsin. But then this low begins to really cut. So some areas will switch from snow to a wintry mix back to rain. But then there's cold air kind of diving down on the western flank of this low. Could get another low impulse of energy off this upper trough that forms. And but whoever stays all snow with this, guys, like this corridor right in here, could get well over a foot of snow. And, with just kind of the placement of this low kind of going right across Wisconsin, you're certainly you're gonna struggle with staying like all snow, right? And then this moves on off, and we just have to watch what happens after that. But, to kind of back this up here, there's a severe weather threat for Sunday, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And that is because of this initial low that kind of forms. Could have a dry line set up somewhere into here where you just see green, could be strong to severe storms. And then we have Monday, and with the placement of this low, even though it's weakening, this is going to bring ample amount of moisture into a warm to moist sector right down here. And where you just see green, that could be supercell development, a line of nasty storms down here in eastern Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas, maybe into Mississippi. And then we have to watch downstream later in the next week. But if we're talking about the snow, here's the European ensemble in 2-day periods. So here comes that signal that moves in over the weekend. Several inches of snow in the Sierra Nevada. Not a huge event for the Cascades and really anywhere in the Rockies, really. What's impressive is once this gets out of the higher elevations of Montana, you start to get a pretty decent snowfall signal in Montana. But then you see the energy down here. There's a snowfall signal for Denver again, Colorado Springs, up against the Front Range. And then this trails on off into the central U.S. And then more of a substantial winter storm for the western U.S. could move in late next week. Okay? But then we move, let's just go on and move into the central U.S. Same deal. Okay? This system heads on off that we talked about earlier in the video. Here comes that next winter storm signal. Right? 2-day intervals. So let's just look at 3-day intervals here. Okay? And you got this stripe of accumulating snow all the way down to western Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska. But the epicenter of this is right up in here into Minnesota, even areas of Nebraska, South Dakota, and even still has a solid signal into northern Wisconsin. So this isn't what's going to fall over the next 48 hours. This is just another system. So, just north of Minneapolis and just west, this area right here, over 1.5 feet snowfall in certain areas. So this is going to be a big one, guys. I really think it has the potential to be a big late season winter storm. And one thing to pay attention to also is just a little bit of ice that could accumulate from this event over the next 48 hours. But you see how it increases that is the ice signal for the big system we just talked about. So I think there's going to be maybe a shot of some freezing rain with this. We'll see. Now, the latest model guidance kind of has dropped off a little bit from the freezing rain scenario with this, but I do think there will be a corridor of some freezing rain that develops somewhere in the middle of all this pink right here. And in talking about the severe weather ingredients, guys, it goes down to this far out. Let's just look at surface moisture and CAPE. Okay, and we'll talk about the kinematics a little bit more in later videos, but you're going to have a belt of favorable mid-level flow that's going to aid in the lift of these thunderstorms. But, we start to get into Sunday afternoon. You don't have a huge moisture return. Dew points in the 50s, but you got a little bit of a dry line set up. This will help aid in the initiation of some thunderstorms in this area. We need some rain in this area, but, we don't need it in a tornado outbreak, but I don't think we're going to get that. But you're probably going to have the opportunity for some supercells to form along this weak dry line. This isn't a stout cutoff between deep moisture and very dry air. This moisture is not very deep. You get deeper into Texas, a little bit better moisture return. And as we are getting into Friday morning, you can see the dew points creeping into the 60s as far north as the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we get into our Monday. Monday has, I think, a higher ceiling. I think that depending on the placement of low pressure up here to the north, this could turn into more of a significant event. But we're getting into Monday midday. You're getting this area of moist air, dew points into the 60s, even some 70s maybe, as far north as southern Arkansas. You overlap that or underlap that, whatever you want to say, with the favorable flow aloft, wind flow aloft. Classic overlapping of ingredients for severe weather. And I definitely think we'll have an ongoing severe weather threat into Monday night next week into Tuesday morning. And then it gets kind of weird once we get into Wednesday. We need to still figure that out. But you mix that with the CAPE levels due to the response of the higher moisture levels. And, there's a little bit of energy showing up here along the dry line. And this is mainly because you have a cold air intrusion really close by in the upper levels of the atmosphere, aiding in better what we call lapse rates, which means the temperature increases pretty quickly with height. But you kind of move into our Monday, it gets kind of weird. Some favorable CAPE levels down here somewhat, but I expect this to increase. There is a lot of energy just out into the Gulf of Mexico. This could trend further north. We need to watch that. Okay, so the Storm Prediction Center, to wrap all this up, making pretty good time in here. Wrap all this up, you still got that slight risk, and this looks like your classic dry line slight risk. For Sunday, okay, if I mix any days up, I do apologize. So this is for Sunday. Now, that's for the dry line kind of setup from Kansas. Even has a section of southern Nebraska and all the way down into areas of Texas and western Oklahoma included in this. So a slight risk, that means there's a level 2 out of 5 risk at day 4 for Sunday. Then, day 5, this is for Monday, a severe weather risk for the lower Mississippi Valley areas. This includes Memphis, Little Rock, Alexandria, Shreveport, Monroe, Jackson, all these areas right in here. Both Jacksons in Mississippi and Tennessee. So, level 2 out of 5 risk. It always seems like this area is the hardest hit area. Okay. But a level 2 out of 5 risk. We need to watch this risk right in here, I would say. So after that, it just really just says predictability too low the rest of the week, next week. But we could have some severe weather threats later next week also. That's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and I'll talk to you again soon.